Before we begin, imagine standing at your sister's wedding, then realizing the Alpha King staring at you is actually your soulmate. Now imagine your own sister realizing it too. If you love betrayal, forbidden romance, obsessive Alpha Kings, and emotional revenge stories, subscribe, like, and share, and stay till the end. Because this story starts with a wedding and ends with a kingdom burning. Snow covered the kingdom of Valebrook the night Alpha King Lucien Draven arrived for his wedding. The castle glowed with golden torchlight beneath the storm, while nobles filled the grand courtyard, dressed in silver and black fur. Music echoed through the kingdom. Servants rushed everywhere. Everyone celebrated. Everyone except Nyra Vale. "Fix the train properly," her mother hissed sharply. "For once in your life, try not to embarrass this family." Nyra lowered her gaze quietly and adjusted the long silver wedding dress flowing behind her older sister. Serafina Vale stood before the giant mirror, smiling proudly at her reflection. Beautiful, perfect, admired, everything Nyra had never been. "You should be grateful," Serafina said calmly. "Without me, this family would be nothing." Nyra said nothing. She had spent her entire life learning silence, because silence hurt less. Her mother grabbed her arm suddenly. "Once Serafina becomes queen, perhaps someone from the lower houses will finally take interest in you." The room filled with soft laughter. Nyra forced herself to smile slightly. Even though humiliation burned inside her chest, she was used to it. The ignored sister, the unwanted daughter, the girl constantly hidden behind someone brighter. Then suddenly, the kingdom horns echoed outside. The Alpha King had arrived. Excitement exploded through the castle instantly. Serafina's face lit with triumph. Finally. Servants rushed around them quickly, while nobles gathered toward the grand ceremony hall. Nyra remained behind, helping carry the heavy wedding train through the snow-covered corridors. But the moment she stepped inside the royal hall, everything changed. The room fell silent, not completely, just strangely, like the air itself had tightened. Nyra frowned slightly. Then she saw him. Alpha King Lucien Draven stood at the front of the hall beneath towering black banners, dressed entirely in dark royal armor trimmed with fur. Tall, cold, terrifyingly handsome. His silver eyes swept across the room carelessly until they landed on her, and suddenly pain exploded through Nyra's chest. She gasped sharply. The tray in her hands crashed onto the floor. The sound echoed violently through the hall. Lucien froze instantly. The entire kingdom watched in confusion as the Alpha King slowly turned away from his bride and stared directly at Nyra. The mate bond. The realization spread instantly. Gasps erupted across the room. Serafina's smile disappeared immediately. Nyra's breathing became uneven. No, this couldn't happen. Not here. Not now, not to her. Lucien took one slow step forward. His wolf was awake. She could see it in his eyes. Possessive, dangerous, obsessed. "Impossible," one elder whispered. Serafina looked between them in horror. Then fury, pure fury. Nyra stepped backward immediately. Lucien stepped forward again. The tension between them thickened violently. The mate bond pulsed painfully through both of them. And suddenly, Lucien's wolf growled. The sound shook the entire hall. Several nobles flinched, because alpha wolves never lost control publicly. Never. Serafina grabbed Lucien's arm instantly. Lucien, the alpha, didn't even look at her. His eyes remained locked on Nyra, only Nyra. "Your Majesty," one elder said nervously. "The ceremony?" Lucien ignored him completely. Nyra turned immediately and fled the hall. Humiliation burned through her entire body. She could hear whispers exploding behind her. The wrong sister, the Alpha's mate, the cursed bond. By the time she reached the outer courtyard, snow had already soaked through her dress. Her breathing shook violently. Why her? Why now? And worst of all, why did a part of her already want him? The giant castle doors burst open behind her. Nyra turned sharply. Lucien stepped into the storm. Snow gathered instantly across his dark shoulders as he approached slowly, dangerously. "You ran," he said quietly. Nyra laughed bitterly. "What else was I supposed to do? Stand there while my sister watches her future disappear?" Lucien's jaw tightened. She was never my future. The words hit harder than they should have. Nyra crossed her arms. "You're still marrying her." Silence. The Alpha looked away briefly toward the falling snow. "The alliance prevents war. Then congratulations." Nyra turned to leave. But suddenly, Lucien grabbed her wrist. The mate bond exploded violently between them. Both of them froze instantly. Heat surged through Nyra's chest. Too intense, too dangerous. Lucien's breathing changed slightly, like he was struggling to control himself. "Don't walk away from me," he said quietly. Nyra stared at him in disbelief. "You're unbelievable." His silver eyes darkened. "You're my mate, and she's your bride." Silence. The snowstorm howled around them. Lucien slowly stepped closer. "So why does my wolf only want you?" Nyra's heartbeat became uneven instantly. The tension between them turned unbearable. Then suddenly, a voice echoed from above. How touching. Both of them looked upward sharply. Seraphina stood on the castle balcony staring down at them, and the hatred in her eyes was terrifying. "You humiliated me," she said softly. Nyra shook her head immediately. "Seraphina." Quiet. The older sister descended the stairs slowly into the snow. Her expression no longer beautiful, no longer elegant, just furious. "You always ruin things," she whispered. Lucien stepped protectively in front of Nyra instantly. Seraphina noticed, and somehow, that hurt her even more. "You chose her?" she asked quietly. Lucien said nothing, which was answer enough. Seraphina laughed bitterly. Then, suddenly, she looked directly at Nyra. "You have no idea what you just started." Fear crawled slowly into Nyra's chest. But before anyone could speak again, the kingdom alarms began ringing violently. Lucien's expression darkened instantly. War horns echoed across the snowy mountains. Then came screaming. The castle guards rushed into the courtyard. "Rogue attack!" one shouted desperately. Panic exploded instantly, and somewhere beyond the kingdom walls, a terrifying howl echoed through the storm, one that made even Lucien's wolf uneasy. Snow exploded across the kingdom walls as warriors rushed through Ravencrest Castle. The alarms screamed through the storm. Servants ran in panic. Children cried. And somewhere beyond the frozen forest, the rogues were coming. Lucien's expression darkened instantly as another howl echoed through the mountains. Not ordinary rogues. Something worse. He turned sharply toward Nyra. "Stay inside the castle." Nyra crossed her arms immediately. "I'm not a child. You're my mate." The words hit harder this time. Possessive, protective, dangerously intense. Before she could answer, another explosion shook the kingdom walls violently. Stone cracked somewhere outside. The guards panicked instantly. Lucien grabbed Nyra's wrist without hesitation and pulled her behind him. The movement was automatic, instinctive. His wolf was already treating her like something precious. Seraphina noticed immediately, and hatred flashed across her face. "Lucien," she said sharply, "the warriors need you." The Alpha's eyes never left Nyra. "Take her inside." Nyra yanked her wrist free instantly. "I said I'm not helpless." Lucien stepped closer immediately. "You don't understand what's out there." "And you do?" The tension between them thickened instantly. The mate bond pulsed hard beneath Nyra's skin. Too warm, too consuming. She hated how aware she became around him. The way his silver eyes followed every movement she made. The way his body instinctively moved closer to hers. Like his wolf physically couldn't stay away. Another howl echoed. Closer now. Lucien's expression changed immediately. Fear, real fear. Not for himself. For her. That terrified Nyra more than the rogues. Because Alpha Kings didn't fear anything. Yet somehow, he feared losing her. "Go," he ordered the warriors. The guards rushed toward the outer walls instantly. Lucien turned back toward Nyra again. "You're staying with me." Seraphina laughed bitterly. "Of course she is." Nobody answered her, which somehow hurt worse. The older sister stared at Nyra silently for several seconds. Then finally, "You always steal everything from me." Nyra's chest tightened painfully. "I never wanted this, but you have it." Seraphina's voice cracked slightly. And for 1 second, Nyra almost felt guilty. Almost. Then the outer gates exploded open. The sound shook the entire courtyard violently. Massive black wolves flooded through the entrance beneath the snowstorm. Screaming erupted instantly. Lucien shifted mid-motion. Enormous black wolf. Silver eyes glowing. Pure alpha dominance exploded through the courtyard. The rogues hesitated instantly, then attacked anyway. Chaos erupted. Wolves slammed into each other beneath falling snow. Blood stained the courtyard red within seconds. Nyra stepped backward in shock as one rogue lunged toward her. Before it reached her, Lucien tore the creature apart violently. His wolf moved with terrifying brutality. Not protecting the kingdom, protecting her. Another rogue charged. Lucien intercepted again instantly. Nobody touched her. Nobody came near her. And suddenly, Nyra realized something dangerous. The Alpha King wasn't fighting like a ruler. He was fighting like a mate. obsessively, violently, possessively. The realization made her chest tighten. Then suddenly, a rogue shifted back into human form mid-battle. The entire courtyard froze, because rogues never shifted voluntarily during attacks. The man looked directly at Nyra and smiled. There she is. Fear crawled slowly into her chest. The rogue ignored everyone else completely, only watching her. Lucien's wolf stepped protectively in front of Nyra immediately, growling. The rogue laughed softly. The bloodline really survived. Nyra frowned. What bloodline? The rogue's smile widened. You don't know? Lucien shifted back instantly into human form. What is he talking about? The rogue looked almost amused now. You found your mate without knowing what she is? Silence. Snow fell heavily around them. Nyra's heartbeat quickened. Lucien slowly looked toward her, confused, dangerously focused. The rogue's expression darkened slightly. She belongs to the Moonborn line. The courtyard fell silent instantly. Several elders went pale. One whispered quietly, "Impossible." Nyra looked around in confusion. What does that mean? Nobody answered immediately, which terrified her more. The rogue smiled again. That means kingdoms die for her blood. Then suddenly, he ripped a blade from his own chest and threw it directly at Nyra. Everything happened too fast. Nyra froze. Lucien moved instantly. The Alpha caught the blade with his bare hand before it touched her. Blood spilled across the snow, his blood. Nyra's breath caught sharply. Lucien barely reacted to the injury. His silver eyes remained locked on the rogue. "Murderess, you came for her," he said quietly. The rogue grinned. "We all did." Then suddenly, the rogue bit into poison hidden beneath his tongue. His body collapsed instantly into the snow. Dead, silence swallowed the courtyard again. Snow drifted slowly around the corpse. Nyra stared at the blood running down Lucien's hand. "You're bleeding." Lucien ignored the wound completely. Instead, he grabbed her face gently. The movement shocked both of them. Soft, careful, dangerously intimate. "Are you hurt?" The question came out almost desperate. Nyra's heartbeat stumbled violently. "No," Lucien exhaled quietly. Relief crossed his face instantly, and somehow, that scared her. Because this wasn't normal attraction anymore. This was obsession beginning. The elders approached cautiously. "The Moonborn line was believed extinct," one whispered. Lucien looked toward them sharply. "Explain." The old elder hesitated. Then finally, Moonborn wolves were not ordinary wolves. Nyra frowned. "What does that mean?" The elder swallowed hard. "They could strengthen alpha bloodlines." Silence. Another elder spoke quietly. "And control ancient wolf magic." Nyra stared at them in disbelief. "That's impossible." The old man looked directly at her. "Your mother disappeared 20 years ago after refusing to marry a king from the Eastern Territories." Fear slowly crawled into Nyra's chest. "What does that have to do with me?" The elder's face darkened. "You are the last surviving Moonborn." The storm howled violently around the kingdom, and suddenly everything made sense. The attacks, the whispers, the way rogues looked at her, the way Lucien's wolf reacted to her. She wasn't just a mate. She was something kingdoms would kill for. Lucien looked at her slowly, and for the first time, Nyra saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not fear of her, fear for her. Then suddenly, Seraphina laughed softly behind them. Everyone turned toward her. The older sister stood beneath the falling snow, watching Nyra carefully. "You finally understand now," she said quietly. Nyra frowned. "Understand what?" Seraphina's eyes darkened. "That your existence destroys everything around you." Lucien stepped forward instantly. "Enough." But Seraphina ignored him. "First my wedding," she whispered bitterly. "Now the kingdom." Nyra's chest tightened painfully. Lucien moved closer beside her protectively. But before anyone could speak again, a deep horn echoed from beyond the mountains. Not a kingdom horn. Something darker, something ancient. Every wolf in the courtyard froze instantly. Even Lucien, because they all recognized the sound. The Shadow Legion, the deadliest wolf army in the north. And they were coming for her. The horn echoed across the frozen mountains again. Deep, ancient, terrifying. Every wolf in Ravencrest courtyard froze instantly, because everyone knew the Shadow Legion, and everyone feared them. The deadliest army in the north. A wolf empire built entirely on conquest, slaughter, and blood magic. And now, they were marching toward Ravencrest. For Nyra, snow fell heavily across the ruined courtyard as warriors rushed toward the kingdom walls. Panic spread quickly. The elders whispered fearfully among themselves. And standing in the middle of it all, Nyra felt like she couldn't breathe. The last Moonborn. The reason kingdoms were preparing for war. Lucien stepped closer beside her immediately. Protective, possessive. Like his wolf physically refused to leave her side now. "You're staying with me," he said quietly. Nyra looked up at him. "Lucy, no." His silver eyes locked onto hers intensely. "I'm not losing you." The words hit harder than they should have, because she realized something terrifying. He meant them, completely. Then suddenly, Serafina laughed softly behind them. Cold, sharp, broken. "You still don't understand," she whispered. Everyone turned toward her. The older sister stood beneath the snowfall with tears in her eyes. But there was nothing soft about her expression anymore, only hatred. "You chose her over your kingdom," she said to Lucien quietly. The Alpha's jaw tightened. "She is my mate, and I was supposed to be your queen." Silence filled the courtyard. Nyra stepped forward slowly. "Serafina, don't." The older sister looked directly at her. "I spent my entire life protecting this family." Her voice cracked slightly. "And the one thing I wanted was taken by the sister nobody even noticed." Nyra's chest tightened painfully. "I never wanted this. But you have it." Serafina's eyes darkened completely now. "And I hate you for it." Before anyone could react, she pulled a hidden blade from beneath her cloak and drove it directly into the chest of the nearest guard. Screams erupted instantly. The courtyard exploded into chaos again. "Serafina!" Nyra shouted in horror. But it was too late. The older sister stepped backward, smiling bitterly as dozens of hidden warriors suddenly emerged from the shadows surrounding the kingdom walls. Traitors. Shadow Legion spies. Lucien's expression turned murderous instantly. "You betrayed Ravencrest." Serafina's eyes filled with tears. "No," she whispered painfully. "You betrayed me first." Then suddenly, the kingdom gates exploded inward. The Shadow Legion had arrived. Massive black wolves flooded through the entrance beneath the violent snowstorm. Their armor was dark silver, their eyes glowing unnatural blue, and at the center of them, a man rode slowly through the snow on an enormous white wolf. King Malric, ruler of the Shadow Legion. The moment he saw Nyra, he smiled, and every instinct inside Lucien turned violent. Malric stepped down slowly from the beast beneath him, tall, ancient, terrifyingly calm. "So the rumors were true," he said softly. His icy blue eyes locked onto Nyra possessively. "The last Moonborn survived." Lucien moved immediately in front of her, protective, deadly. "You will not touch her." Malric smiled faintly. "That's where you're wrong, Alpha." The Shadow King stepped forward slowly. "She belongs to me." Lucien's wolf exploded forward instantly. The attack happened so fast most warriors didn't even see it. But Malric caught him mid-motion, one hand around the Alpha's throat. The courtyard froze in shock, because nobody stopped Lucien that easily. Nobody. Malric smiled calmly while holding the struggling Alpha King in the air. "You are strong," he admitted. Then his eyes darkened, but not strong enough. He threw Lucien violently across the courtyard. Stone exploded beneath the impact. Nyra screamed, "Lucien!" The Alpha rose immediately despite blood running down his face. His silver eyes glowed wildly now, murderous, obsessed. His wolf was losing control completely because someone had touched his mate, and Alpha wolves never forgave that. Malric looked amused. "How interesting." His gaze shifted toward Nyra again. The bond already controls him. Nyra stepped backward instinctively. Fear crawled through her chest. Not just fear of Malric, fear of herself. Fear of what everyone wanted from her bloodline. Malric approached slowly through the snow. "Your mother should have surrendered when I offered peace." Nyra froze instantly. "You knew my mother?" The Shadow King's expression darkened slightly. "She refused to give me the Moonborn bloodline." A pause. "So I burned her kingdom instead." Something inside Nyra cracked violently. The storm above Ravencrest darkened instantly. Snow spiraled harder around the courtyard. Lucien noticed immediately. Nyra. But she barely heard him. Her breathing became uneven. Her chest burned painfully. "You killed her," she whispered. Malric tilted his head slightly. "She chose death." Pain exploded through Nyra's body. Then suddenly, the wind stopped. Complete silence swallowed the courtyard. Every wolf froze instinctively, because something had changed. Nyra slowly lifted her head, and her eyes were glowing silver, not normal wolf silver, moonlight silver. The air itself began trembling around her. Malric's expression changed instantly. Shock. Real shock. Impossible. The ancient power inside her finally awakened. Snow lifted from the ground unnaturally. The storm began circling around her body. And suddenly, every wolf in the courtyard dropped to one knee, even Lucien, not by choice, by force. Moonborn dominance. Nyra stared at her trembling hands in horror. "What's happening to me?" The ancient voice inside her finally answered clearly. "You were born to rule them." Malric stepped backwards slowly for the first time. Fear flashed across his face. "No." Nyra lifted her eyes toward him. Silver light glowed beneath her skin now. The storm obeyed her breathing. "You took everything from me," she whispered. Then suddenly, the snowstorm exploded. Violent silver energy ripped through the battlefield instantly. Shadow Legion warriors screamed as the ground beneath them cracked apart. Malric tried moving toward her, but Lucien intercepted him violently. The Alpha slammed into the Shadow King with enough force to destroy stone walls around them. The battle erupted instantly. Snow, blood, silver light. Chaos consumed Ravencrest. Nyra's power spiraled wildly around the kingdom. And for the first time, she understood why kingdoms feared the Moonborn. Because they weren't ordinary wolves. They were living weapons. Malric broke free from Lucien's attack violently. His body bloodied now, desperate. "You cannot control that power." Nyra's silver eyes locked onto him, cold, ancient. "Watch me." The storm obeyed instantly. Massive waves of snow and silver light crashed through the battlefield. The Shadow Legion collapsed beneath it, warriors thrown violently into frozen stone. Even Malric stumbled backward in terror now. Lucien stared at Nyra in disbelief. Not fear, awe, absolute awe. Because the quiet girl nobody noticed had become the most powerful wolf alive. Malric looked around desperately. His army was collapsing. The battle was lost. And for the first time in centuries, the Shadow King feared someone. Nyra stepped toward him slowly, snow floating unnaturally around her. "You hunted me my entire life," she said quietly. Malric backed away. "You don't understand what you are." "No," Nyra whispered calmly, "but I know what you are." The storm tightened violently around him. Silver light wrapped across his body. Malric screamed, and then he vanished into ash. Silence swallowed Ravencrest Kingdom instantly. The storm stopped. Snow drifted softly through the ruined courtyard. Bodies covered the battlefield. The Shadow Legion was gone, and every wolf in the kingdom stared at Nyra in stunned silence. Lucien slowly approached her through the snow. Blood covered his face, his breathing uneven, but his silver eyes remained locked completely on her, only her. "You stayed," Nyra whispered. Lucien stopped directly in front of her. There was never another choice. Emotion tightened painfully inside her chest. Because for the first time, she believed him. The Alpha slowly lowered himself to one knee before her. The entire kingdom gasped. An Alpha King kneeling, not in defeat, in devotion. Lucien lifted his gaze toward her quietly. "My kingdom," he said softly, "belongs to you." Snow drifted gently around them, and for the first time in her life, Nyra no longer felt invisible. If your soulmate betrayed you at first, but later crossed an entire kingdom to protect you, would you forgive them? Comment forgive or walk way below. Pellets free, and subscribe now, because the next werewolf romance story will be even darker.